Welcome to Punky's World. This is an editorial, an expose on Margaret Sanger, RN. I call this Margaret Sanger Fallen Heroine. I saw a movie starring Dana Delaney about Margaret Sanger. She did that movie about the same time that she did the movie where she portrayed Bob Saget's sister who was dying of scleroderma. Excuse me. And I thought, I like her. I liked her in that movie. I liked her in a couple of other movies. I liked her in Sisters. So why not? And it's a historical true movie. So, and she became my hero or heroine until my mother told me the real truth about Margaret Sanger. And I was like, that doesn't line up with the movie at all. So I did my own research. And my mother was 100% correct. She was no heroine. It made it sound like she advocated for women's health, wanted to help families who were having to have, 12 and up children because there wasn't any access to any kind of contraception at the time. i.e. birth control. The pill didn't exist. None of these shots existed, obviously. There were diaphragms, cervical gaps, very old style unreliable condoms. And it made it sound like she wanted to help those women, those poor women who were having, those poor married women who were having multiples and multiples of children because they did not have access to birth control. And birth control wasn't that great. It wasn't that at all. They left out a very important chunk of what she did. The movie was a farce. It was a lie. This woman was a eugenicist. Now, eugenics, she was also a racist and a member of the Ku Klux Klan in such good standing that they gave her an honorary title. Eugenics is did I write down the definition in my own words here? The study of how to reproduce humans with desired characteristics, including race. These are the things that they wanted to control. Race, deformities, disabilities. And one way of doing this was not letting inferior people reproduce, so as to not pass on their inferiorities, their bad genes. Unless something is severely genetically linked, you're not going to pass it on. Chances are better than even. And I'll get there because I wrote down, the deformities in my own family. And the chances of passing those on aren't that great. And they're not deformities that are going to cause problems, for the most part. And I'll explain those after. But she believed that people like me should have been sterilized because I had a brain injury and I have birth defects, which, again, I'll go into. And I shouldn't even be here as far as she was concerned. Again, because of birth defects and a brain injury. Her story has been changed and watered down to exclude all of these things. She was so bad, Hitler cited her as an inspiration for his atrocities. Yikes! Eek! Where's that emoji with the huge eyes? Or the one with the teeth? Either one would fit. I mean, it just sickens me that I looked up to this woman. I thought she just wanted to help. Everything that movie said was a lie in capital letters. I still can't believe I questioned my mother when she tried to tell me the truth about Margaret Sanger. I remember saying I thought she'd be horrified at some of the things that Planned Parenthood was doing, like actually killing babies. Because they made it sound like it wasn't abortion she was after. She just wanted to help prevent these women from having to have 12, 15, in some cases, literally, I kid you not, 21 or 22 children. That can't be good for the human body. What would that do to your insides, first of all? Your uterus, the organs that are affected by the growing of your uterus, your cervix, your vagina. We're all adults here. We can say those words. Those are technical medical words. What would that do to you? And I have an ancestor who had 21 babies during that time period. Would she have liked to have birth control? Hell yeah. I'm sure she would have at some point. I mean, they weren't the Duggars. You know? This is a woman who would have been happy that I was unable to have a child, unable to become a mother. No one has the right to make that decision for you. And there was a time in this country where it was legal for a parent to sterilize their handicapped child. If your child had Down syndrome, if your child was profoundly mentally handicapped. I can't say the R word because people have used it as a bad word. And it's not a bad word. It literally means you learn more slowly than others. That's what the word retarded means. It means slowed. That's why we call some clothes flame retardant. It doesn't stop flames altogether. It slows flames. It retards them. So that word simply means slow. I remember when I was a kid being called a riri, a reject, the R word, and being so upset. And my mother said, why don't you look the word up? So I got my dictionary and I looked up the word. And I said, Mommy, this is me. It just says you're slow to learn things. Or it's an object that slows something bad from happening, like flame retardant fabric. Like fabric that stops flames for a little bit. She said, that's right. It's not a bad word. They just use it as a bad word. And I never forgot that lesson. It was such an important lesson that all kids should have and understand. To know the word in its proper context. Any kid that had any kind of genetic disorder, disability, whether if it was a physical disability like blindness, deafness, spina bifida where you couldn't walk, and spina bifida I don't think you're going to pass on to your kids, but okay. Some people have spina bifida occulta, which means they don't even know it. My mother took care of a boy when she was in her mid to late teens who they didn't know had spina bifida until he came in from playing outside with bloody feet. And they're like, sit down, what the hell happened to your feet? And he said, I don't feel anything. What? He never felt his feet, yet he walked and did everything normally, but he never felt his feet. So they took him to the doctor, and I guess the doctor must have cleaned the wounds and everything, and did a couple of things, and he's got spina bifida. That's why he doesn't feel his feet. It's a miracle that he's walking. But he wasn't going to pass that on to his kids. I'm sure he went on to live a fairly normal life, just wearing shoes everywhere to make sure he didn't destroy his feet again. He's most likely still alive. He was pretty young. At that time, he was probably 6 or 7 years old, and my mother was a teenager, so he's probably 10 or 11 years younger than my mother, so he would be about 60. And she didn't believe that black people or Jewish people should be reproducing. Now, as far as the genetics go, and what birth defects are usually not genetic. They're usually a mistake during fetal growth. It can sometimes be caused by outside factors, like thalidomide, which I would highly, not hardly, suggest that you research a little bit. It was marketed as an anti-nausea drug for pregnancy. Well, something in it caused the babies of mothers who took it for their morning sickness to be born sans a few things. Minus arms, legs, hands, toes, fingers, all sorts of things. And she didn't believe that people born sans an arm, meaning without, sans means without, should be allowed to reproduce because they might pass their... No. Because there was a mistake in the womb, or there was some environmental factor around the mother that caused a baby to be born without something, a part they should have had, does not mean they're going to pass that on to their children. Now, I did some research on my birth defects and some of my disorders, as well as my father's birth defect. I have IBS and IBD. IBS is irritable bowel syndrome, which we called spastic colon back in the day. IBD is inflammatory bowel disease, which is Crohn's disease, colitis, that sort of thing. Yes, there are genetic components, and it does run in my family. However, I am not likely to automatically pass, they both do. I'm not likely to automatically pass them to my kids. I would, if I had kids, I would watch my kids, and if my kids were having the kind of belly aches that I had, you bet your life I'd be at the pediatrician saying, look, I have spastic colon. Did I pass it on? And I would feel horrible. But chances are that wouldn't happen. It's very unlikely. My cancer, my first cancer, Hodgkin's disease, is a disease that genetically is passed from cousin to cousin. It's very unique. I remember reading the genetics about it in the oncology office because they had a booklet that had the what genetic testing should be done for each disease. It does say that if you have hip dysplasia, which I do, it can be a combination of environmental causes, positioning in the womb, and all those things. But there are also a bunch of genes that come into play. There's also, I can't remember what it was, but it makes girls more likely to be born with it. It has to do with something that goes into the baby to a refund has been issued. Was that my bed? I'll have to look. However, with hip dysplasia, you should also, they say your children should have genetic testing, which I did not know. But like I said, hip dysplasia in females, they had discovered that there was something in the mother that some girls didn't pick up that allowed the hip to move or something. I don't remember the exact, but it was a factor inside the mom. It wasn't genetic in that case, although it can be genetic. And it is important to watch for it in other members of your family. But it's not something that can't be fixed as a baby. I lived a perfectly normal life with a few inconveniences along the way, like my hip, because my particular hip, the socket didn't grow. So periodically it would get stuck. Like if I was sitting in this position as a kid, I'm sitting Indian style or what they now call crisscross applesauce, I would try to get up and my hip would be stuck with my knee up like this. And I would try to get up and I would have to literally, oh, shut up. Lay on it, push it down and push it back in, the hip. That hurt like hell. But I remember one time my cousins got up because we were going to go play in the playroom after watching something on TV. And I'm looking at my mom and my knee is up and my hip is in a weird position. So I had to literally push it down until I heard it pop. Then I was able to get back up. But hold on, I gotta fix my hip, and that was just part of my life. Now it doesn't fit anyway, so. But mine didn't completely grow either. So mine was a little more than positional in the womb because mine didn't grow. So there probably is a genetic factor. Who knows? I have something called pectus excavatum, which is more of a vanity issue than anything else. I was told by a pediatric cardiologist that once I developed breasts, it wouldn't be noticeable. Come back to me when you have pectus excavatum or chicken breast and a set of boobs and tell me that again, because you have neither because you're male. Well, no, the part about boobs because he's male, but that does run in families. My uncle had a form of it, but his was protruding rather than, no, his was in. But his came later. It was a weird thing. So we know that it's genetic in our family. And of course I would watch my child for it, but it's not that likely I would pass it on to my child. But other family members might have it. I don't know. Because the male family members are the only ones I ever see without a shirt. Now, can it be a problem? Yeah, because it does cause pain and difficulty breathing with extreme physical activity. What is it? Well, pectus excavatum literally means pectus, or chest, pectoral. And excavatum literally means excavate, or excavated, an excavated area, a hole. So it literally means hole in the chest. And it's because the ribs go like this and the sternum grows like, instead of growing straight, it grows like that, and the ribs grow like that, which makes it so much fun to try to do a self breast exam, because I've got ribs that are just crushed up underneath my boobs, and I have this hole in the middle of my chest that makes my boobs go out here. Like literally, instead of being together like this, they go out here. My friend was saying the other day, because we were talking about how I'd love to get them reduced. She said, well, they're as wide as your shoulders. And I explained to her about my pectus excavatum and how it literally causes them to end up under my armpits when I lay down in bed. I'm sorry, that's not attractive to anyone. And it's always been that way, even before, gravity started doing its unpleasant job on my body. Even before that, I always had that issue. So for him to say that it would cover it is baloney. But yeah, it does have a genetic component, but it's not something you're definitely going to pass on to your kid. Now, if both parents had it, which would be weird, only because it's a fairly rare condition. In fact, I thought I was the only one. I mean, I guess, when I was a kid, because I never heard of it, then I went to the pediatric cardiologist, and he said, I have a male patient who has it. I am pulling you out of gym class because they don't listen when we tell them that she needs to stop that these patients need to stop when they're in pain. So I just pull these patients right out of gym class, which is, whatever. And so, again, with all of these things, you can live a normal life as long as things are taken care of. Like with IBD, you need to have colonoscopies, have the right treatments. IBS, or what I call spastic colon from when I was diagnosed in the 70s. There isn't a specific treatment. Back then, they would give you a medication called phenobarbital, which, in case you didn't know, is a barbiturate. Thus, the barbital plus the not plus the, okay, it's a barbiturate. Hence, the barbi in barbital, that indicates it's a barbiturate, which is a very serious drug usually used to treat seizures. And they felt that it was a seizure in the colon, so they would treat it as such. And they found out later on that it's not. The colon's muscular movement, the peristalsis, is messed up. And it can be caused to be messed up and cause an attack if you are stressed out. And I was stressed out to the max as a kid because of bullying and stuff. So I would have frequent attacks. But I would have attacks before I ever went to school. Now if I have an attack, heating pad on the belly, which I do need to get a heating pad for that. Although I do have one that I can heat up in the microwave. And just find a comfortable position and do not move for hours. But I'd rather have a heating pad, truthfully. Um, and the problem with having IBD and IBS at the same time is they both require a different diet. IBS requires a fairly heavy fiber diet, whereas inflammatory bowel disease does not like a high fiber diet because it already makes you poop a lot. So it's kind of, you've got both conditions fighting with each other. So, which is not uncommon, by the way. My father had club foot. Club foot is a turning of the foot. It can be turned kind of sideways, or in my father's case, all the way around backwards. So they turned it around when he was little. He had to wear special orthopedic shoes and stuff. He didn't really think much of it, although he had a limp and he did have pain later in life in the ankle because he didn't have any ankle bones in that ankle. That ankle would go straight down. Instead of having like a lump on either side where the bones were, it would go straight down. If you touched that foot, it had no ankle bones. It was the weirdest thing. And he would see his orthopedist, and he really liked him. Him and another little boy would go see him on the train with their moms, and they really liked him. He was really nice to them. And that can be genetic. But it's an interaction of several genes. It's not just one gene mutation. Several genes interact with each other in order to make that. But there are also environmental factors like not enough folate in the mom. That's possible because my grandparents weren't exactly rich. I've got 30% battery, but I'm almost done anyway. He lived a normal life into his 70s. And yeah, like I said, he limped, he had some pain, he couldn't serve in the military because he couldn't dock walk because of it. And my mom had GI issues from birth, her entire life. My guess, looking back, I think that my mother probably had Crohn's or colitis, and I think that my mother had PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. Looking back. So, which I do not believe is genetic. So, I could be wrong on that. Let me know. Thank you so much for joining me. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I just wanted to tell you my thoughts on Margaret Sanger and about the genetics in my own family and what she would have believed were things that should have kept my father and me from having children, which is ridiculous. Would anyone have known he had clubfoot unless he mentioned it? No. They would wonder why he limped a little. More so when he was tired. But my father always had a unique way of walking. I didn't know what was called a limp when I was a kid. It's just a unique way that my daddy walked that other daddies didn't. But I always knew about his foot. So, again, thank you for joining me. Please subscribe. We're trying to get to 500 by the 4th of July on Kid Missing, and we're trying to get to 300 on this channel. Bye, guys.